Hello ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to begin a series of videos where I discuss different types of ghosts from folklore and literature. In the past on the channel, I have discussed various West Virginia ghost stories, and in those videos I've used terms like phantom and spirit and ghost kind of interchangeably. So I decided to make a chart so that we can categorize and better understand different ghosts from different stories and settings. So the way this chart works is from left to right dictates how perceivable the ghosts are. In other words, how well we can see, hear, some cases smell them with our physical senses. And from top to bottom dictates how corporeal these ghosts are, or how able they are to interact with the physical sphere. And if you're looking at this chart and thinking, wow, that looks an awful lot like the alignment chart from Dungeons & Dragons, yes, that's exactly where I got the idea from. I am a massive dork. So stick around as we explore the top layer of this chart and talk about spirits, shades, and haunts. And as always, thank you very much for watching.
A chill runs down your spine. The hair on your arms stand on end. You're filled with an uneasy feeling like you're being watched. You awake in the middle of the night to your pet staring at the ceiling or a dark corner of your room. You might try and shake it off as your nerves getting the best of you, or you could be in the presence of a spirit.
When I first began researching spirits, I was having trouble finding good examples from folklore and literature, but then I remembered that spirits are essentially the ghosts from ghost hunting TV shows. What I mean by that, since they are the most invisible, the most hardest to detect with the human senses, and the least able to interact with the physical sphere, they typically require the use of digital doodads in order to detect and study. Now personally you might be thinking that ghost hunting is a fairly recent phenomena, but in all actuality the idea of ghost hunting goes all the way back to the mid-19th century. In order to understand the modern phenomena of ghost hunting, we first have to understand both the spiritualist movement and the rapid advancement of technology during the 1800s. During this time period, the telegraph was invented, and for the first time, messages could be sent instantaneously across very long distances. Before that, the only way to send a message would be either by a letter or by traveling and telling the person in person, which could take days, weeks, even months, depending on how far away they were. So if technology was able to cut down the distance between two physical locations, why couldn't technology cut down the distance between the physical realm and the spiritual? Add on top of this the massive loss of life during the American Civil War, and it created the perfect environment for the rise of spiritualism. Spiritualism is the idea that psychics, known as mediums, can communicate with the dead using a variety of different techniques and technologies, which might not seem like a huge issue, but let's say that you've gotten a great inheritance from one of your great-great-aunts. Which is awesome until a psychic medium starts telling you that they've talked to your great-great-aunt and she wants you to leave half of her inheritance to the psychic medium or else something bad might happen to you. And this seems kind of ridiculous on the surface, but there was a lot of this going on. While today we think of Harry Houdini as an illusionist and escape artist, much of his career was spent disproving psychic mediums. Things got so out of control that him and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes stories, actually got into a massive fight and falling out over Houdini disproving psychic mediums. Things got so weird during this time period that Thomas Edison was allegedly working on a spirit phone to communicate directly with the dead because someone asked him if he thought he could make a device that could allow communication with the other side, and in true Thomas Edison fashion, he went absolutely, which translated from Edison to English is, I'm sure I can find someone intelligent enough to make it that I can then patent, and if they try fighting me over the patent, I can ruin them in the courts. With the invention of the phonograph, for the first time, people could hear the voices of the dead once they had already passed. Again, this was a massive technological advancement. Imagine trying to go back even 200, 300, 500 years and trying to explain to someone an invention that allows you to hear the voice of someone who isn't there. Even all the way back then, people were wondering if you could use this new invention to record the voices of ghosts. Fast forward to this day, EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, is a common ghost hunting tactic. If you've ever watched a ghost hunting show where they just leave a tape recorder in an abandoned room or ask questions to a tape recorder trying to see if they can record responses, this is where this practice first began. It is a very old concept or idea, practically as old as voice recordings. When I first started doing research on spirits, I simply want to be able to make a joke and say, oh yeah, when your pet is at the bottom of your bed looking at a dark corner in the middle of the night, there is absolutely a ghost there. And instead, I ended up down a big rabbit hole of ghost fights and EVPs. Some people believe that EVPs are caused by infrasounds. These are sounds below the range of average human hearing. While it is a pseudoscience and borderline conspiracy theory, many hypothesize that ultra-low frequencies can reverberate the parts of the ear that are responsible for sound. And while the brain doesn't actually hear anything, it can cause sensations of uneasiness, feeling watched, and cold chills, all things that are usually tied to spirits. At the end of the day, spirits are a very interesting type of ghost, and ghost hunting should be regarded up there with other types of folklore, and there are absolutely ghosts in the corners of your room whenever you wake up in the middle of the night and your pet is just staring off at nothing. Next up, we're going to talk about shades.
Just as physical objects cast shadows, ghosts might also cast shadows onto the physical sphere. They may take the form of disembodied footsteps, a whisper in your ear when no one is there, ghost lights that disappear as quickly as they appear, or even a shadow that moves in the corner of your eye. While it's easy to explain these away as your mind playing tricks on you, or maybe you're just simply tired, or you could be in the presence of a shade.
Now, shades are a little bit more visible than spirits, but they're still incorporeal, they're still incapable of interacting with the physical sphere. Being from West Virginia, when I think of stories about shades, I think of the many ghost stories associated with the railroads and the mines here. There's many stories of mine cave-ins where miners were able to escape the mine by following what they thought was a co-worker's headlamp, only to come out of the mine and be informed that they were the sole survivor. Another great example are the lanterns that were used to signal different trains. There are many stories of times where trains would see old signal lamps that hadn't been used in decades and associating them with ghost activity. And both the railroad and the coal mines have stories regarding entities known as Tommyknockers. When you're below the surface, either in a tunnel or a mine, it's common to hear the ground kind of shifting and setting over time, which can sound like construction noises, and many times people associated these sounds with ghosts still working down in the tunnels and mines where they passed away. One of my favorite stories from here in the Mountain State regard the Monongah ghost horses. The Monongah mine disaster is the deadliest mine disaster in United States history, and prior to the disaster, horses were still regularly used down in the mines. Due to technological advances after the mine disaster, they never repurchased horses to go back down and work in the mines. But miners reported hearing galloping horses leaving the mines at the same time when the horses would be set free at the end of the day to go to a nearby stable. Now, shades can be more than just audible or visual. There are cases of disembodied smells. For example, there is a hotel here in West Virginia whose original owner was a heavy cigar smoker. And individuals who stay in their suite to this day say that sometimes they wake up to the overwhelming smell of cigar smoke that quickly dissipates once they're awake. Now, one of my favorite and probably the goofiest shade story I have ever heard is the ghost cow of Woodburn Hall in Morgantown, West Virginia. The story goes way back when the university was a military cadet college, a bunch of students decided to get drunk and steal a cow from a local farm. They then proceeded to sneak it across campus and up into the bell tower of Woodburn Hall. If you've ever watched Bob's Burgers, you know that cows can go up steps, but they're not good at going back down steps. Because of that, they had to kill the cow in the bell tower and remove it piece by piece. And ever since then, people have claimed to hear clomping and mooing coming from Woodburn Hall at night. It's also important that we understand what shades aren't. For example, the Hat Man is not a shade. Now, if you wake up to the phantom smell of crab rangoon, that might be a shade. Overall, shades are pretty cool, and there's a lot of great folklore and ghost stories surrounding them. Lastly, for this segment, we are going to talk about haunts. Despite disappearing, you know exactly what you saw. Someone walking along the road vanishing into thin air. A ghostly ship on the horizon in the moonlight. Or even a ghostly carriage complete with horses making its way down the street before turning and disappearing from sight. Despite telling yourself it was just your imagination, you know what you saw was a haunt. Haunts are regarded as the most identifiable of the incorporeal ghosts. And for the most part, these ghosts will simply replay their final moments, hours, or even days. And oftentimes these ghosts are associated with anniversaries, certain times of year, certain cycles of the moon, or major weather events. And it is common for these ghosts to disappear if you try approaching them. And on top of ghosts of people, pretty much anything can be a haunt. There's example of ghost horses, ghost ships, ghost trains, ghost cars, and even ghost houses. House haunts, not to be mistaken with a haunted house. For example, there are stories of traveling salesmen who get stuck out in the middle of the road during the rain and they see a house off in the distance, they see lights in the windows, but as they approach it, it disappears. Only for them to discover the next day from a local village that yes, there was a house there at one point, but it burned down decades ago. Now, while that is a good example of a house haunt, a haunted house is something very different. For me, I would say a haunted house is a house or structure or location that has two or more things from this list in it. By far the most famous haunt tale in West Virginia is that of the Greenbrier ghost. It is a fact that Edward Shue was convicted of murdering his wife in 1897, but the story surrounding this murder and the ghost of his wife makes it one of the weirdest ghost stories in West Virginia history. After dying under mysterious circumstances, Zana Hester Shue's mother reported that her daughter's ghost came and visited her on 4 separate occasions, each time providing her with more information about her daughter's murder. Eventually, the mother pestered the sheriff of Greenbrier County and the prosecuting attorney so much that they went to the state coroner to settle it once and for all about what was found in the autopsy. And it turned out that the state coroner did not do a proper autopsy because the husband, Edward Shue, would not let him. This caused the police to go and dig up the body of Zana Hester Shue, and it turned out that she had a broken neck. Eventually, Edward Shue would be convicted for the murder of his wife, and to this day, it is the only time the testimony of a ghost has ever been used in a West Virginia court trial. And while haunts are super interesting, and I might get in some trouble for saying this, hitchhiker ghost, I know there's a lot of great folklore about people who picked up hitchhikers not knowing that they're ghosts. I would not consider those haunts. Now, let's say ghosts who run out in front of vehicles and then when the person slams on the brakes, they disappear. Absolutely, those could be haunts, but the fact that haunts are incorporeal, which means they can't open up the car doors to actually get inside the vehicle to be a hitchhiker ghost, yeah, haunts are not hitchhiker ghosts. So that's going to wrap up this segment of the video. I hope you tune in next time as we cover the next two layers. Again, there's some super interesting folklore and examples in those categories. But until next time, don't forget to stay wild and stay wonderful and stay spooky. And I'll talk to you later.